In a world full of rush, pause for a drink. Pure, clear, and fresh. Let your mind think. In every sip of 1 and 8 alkaline, you'll find a taste so pure, refreshes the mind. With a 9.5 pH, it's balanced just right. Electrolytes to keep you bright. Potassium fuels your everyday, keeps you glowing in every way. Drink water and mind your business until it's time to stand on it. 1 and 8 alkaline, the water that keeps you glowing. Let's glow.
Peace, 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 and good morning. Grand Rising. What it do, as we say. I want to welcome everybody once again to another Saturday morning with Live from the Resource Center. We ready to go. I got the hat. I'm equipped. I'm not a big hat dude, but right now my hair is not cultivated right now. So I'm rocking this hat. But I hope everybody's had a blessed week and off to a good start to the weekend. I'm gonna give a shout out to the Aggies. I married into this. My wife is an Aggie. Shout out to them this morning. So uh, real quick today. What we're going to do, I'm going to, as I always like to do, first and foremost, is update everybody who may be in this area of what's going on in the community, just certain events and things going on. So I'd like to open up with that. I want to dive into um, a topic I don't think we've discussed on this platform on previous shows, but it's very vital um, in our world and into our communities, and that is the aspect of environmental justice. So I want to touch on a couple of things that's happening in the state of North Carolina and locally uh, in regards to environmental justice, just to bring up an awareness to that and maybe speak to some things and share that. And then I'll just lift up a little something from our book of the month. Let me get that close enough so y'all can see it. Oh, let me turn that way. Of Water and the Spirit, Ritual Magic and the Initiation in the Life of an African Shaman by Maladoma Patrice Somé. All right. So we'll touch on that. And if you jump in the chat, let us know what you're reading. Uh, uh, or as I often say, let me get it running. Reach out to us, right? You can reach us on IG, Facebook. You can email us. Let us know what you're reading. Let us know what you're reading. If you have a book club or group, let us know, and we'll try to lift it up. Um, so with that said, not too much, but we're gonna get right into it, and I might share just an interesting or some some scriptures that might speak to uh, our focus or our purpose in these times. We have a lot going on in our country and in the world, so may speak to that. So with that, I will say, let's start the show. All right. So once again, welcome, welcome. Please make sure you like, share, subscribe, get it out, share it with a friend, and let them know we are in the building. So first and foremost, want to highlight some things as we talked about. This month. It's a big month. A lot of things going on, but the main caveat is the Juneteenth holiday next week, and there's a lot of stuff going on, especially in Greensboro. I know today, this evening, starting at about 5 o'clock in downtown Greensboro, we have the Black Food Truck Festival, which is always a great event, right? Sponsored by A&T. So that begins at 5 o'clock downtown Greensboro. But I want to lift up a couple things once again. First, I want to lift up on June 19th, that is Thursday, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. is the Juneteenth Triad Black Farmers Market. That will be at Hayes Taylor YMCA, 2630 East Florida Street here in Greensboro, where you'll be able to meet the farmers. You'll see live performances. There'll be vendors, food trucks, music, everything. So if you're in the area, please come out on June 19th. I have to leave for a conference that day, but I'm going to try to stop by early when it first opens and maybe try to grab some stuff to support before I hit the road because I'm at a conference that weekend. But please come out and support them. Also, during Juneteenth week, there will be hosted by, let me see, pop it up. I'm getting better with this technology. The Indigo's Cultural Arts Center, along with the International Civil Rights Museum, will be hosting the African School Juneteenth edition. So on Thursday, June 19th, at 6 p.m., they'll have a community activist panel. And all these events will take place at the International Civil Rights Museum, 134 South Elm Street in Greensboro. It's downtown, heart of downtown. The old Woolworths lunch counter and pharmacy, right? But the community activist panel will take place at 6 p.m. on June 19th. And then on that Saturday from 10 to 2 p.m., they're going to have interactive family workshops for ages 7 and up. So they'll have a lot of stuff for the family, right, on the 21st. And that is 10 to 2 p.m. So check that out. And then lastly, which kind of becomes the pinnacle of our Juneteenth celebrations. Give me 1 second. And that is on Saturday, June 21st, the Juneteenth Greensboro Family Fest, which takes place from 5 to 9 p.m. At LeBauer Park downtown. Vendors, food, music, entertainment throughout. It's always a great celebration. I'm going to be gone, but at my conference, there'll be several celebrations that I will be able to attend. But, it's nothing like being home in Greensboro, but it's the 5th annual. I remember the first one that kicked off in 2021. It was at a time where we were just kind of coming out of the pandemic. It was a great time. This was like one of the first major events right after was this the same year, the year before it was signed into law? That was the year, it might have been 2021, the year it was signed into laws and as a federal holiday. But anyway, that is also on Saturday. So once you leave the family interactive space at the International Civil Rights Museum, you can hang around downtown and then come on out to the Juneteenth Family Fest at LeBauer Park. So that's just a few things, but also tomorrow, Sunday, I believe at 3 o'clock at Barber Park is the Juneteenth Gospel Fest. So it's going to be some great music and entertainment there. So if you're in the area, Barber Park tomorrow, June 15th, check us out. Check us out. But also, let me do this before we get into some main topics. But we know that tomorrow is a very special day, right? For those of us who have the privilege of having children, right? And that is Father's Day. So I want to say now to all, before we get started, happy Father's Day. And just like We did back around the Mother's Day Saturday show where we honored Queen Mother Moore. Just want to take this time to honor a father of the movement, and he's, it might not be a big shock. He'd be like, oh damn, but he is a father of the movement for those oppressed and suppressed in the early 1900s to start to build and form our own institutions, right? We had the Black Wall, Durham, Tulsa, but it was Marcus Mosiah Garvey that started to build that reconnection with the continent of Africa, and to encourage building those relations, but building our own industries as well with the Black Star Line, and starting to do for self. Now, some things went wrong, and Marcus was deported to England, where he was in prison, but he's usually credited with the first major, as you see, on like Black nationalist movement. And this is what inspired Queen Mother Moore. So I'm just kind of drawing the connection. But his movement inspired her. But he had the Universal Negro Improvement and Conservation Association, which he launched in 1914. And once again, it was nation building at the time, but it was to kind of lift up our community, right, that had been oppressed, suppressed. And he was one of the first major movements, building it up through publication, right? He was editor of a newspaper, which at that time was the primary source to get the message out and what's going on, and keep communities aware, because we didn't have social media back then. No cell phones or what have you. But it was the press. But I want to give a shout out to him and the connection with him, and being the inspiration to Queen Mother Moore. So with that, and we'll throw that link in the chat. All right, let me make sure now. All right, there we go. I'm back. Let me stop the share. So I was from Britannica, so I will leave that in the chat. Let me say what up to my peoples on Instagram. What's up? I see you, Dr. McAdoo. I see you, Brother Wesley Williams. Oh, shout out T-Ball, Brother Hopkins, Alfonso. Boy, that's my man. Boy, we go back. Biographies TV, Will McKee. Peace to you, brother. Peace to all you. So let me throw that in the chat real quick. Shout out to one of the fathers of the movement, Marcus Mosiah Garvey. That's in the chat if you want that link. So let me get right into it, because I ain't gonna be before you too long. I don't like hearing myself talk too long, but shout out to those on Facebook and those on YouTube as well. Glad you in the building. So one thing we haven't really talked about that really impacts our community is environmental justice. Because oftentimes it can just be seen as just the talks around global warming and waste, and the need to preserve and recycling and stuff, but we never really talk about it in the sense, or these conversations never make it to the forefront of it being an environmental issue, on the injustices that are encroached upon usually poor communities, and more specifically poor communities of color, right? And we see this all around major cities, right? where people tend to place like dumping sites, or we see um, where waste and landfills are placed near certain communities, or just many things like factories are put usually near the poorest areas, or rural areas, with that emit toxins in the air and the water. So we often see this, and it doesn't come to the forefront. But a lot of these things impacts people's lives in their longevity, right? We see high cases of asthma due to pollution in the air from plants. We see high cases of cancer and other diseases come from this, and it rarely makes the front page or the top story, right? So I want to point out something that took place a little while ago here in Greensboro. Um, and this was, and I'm going to just kind of sum it up, but I believe it was the 31st of May, or either last Saturday, the Bingham Park, which is East Greensboro, um, the Bingham Park Environmental Justice Project here in Greensboro hosted a quarterly meeting of the North Carolina Environmental Justice Network, right? And they met, and it was co-sponsored by the North Carolina Conservation Network too. But they met with city officials and the Department of Environmental Quality about a situation. So what most may not know is that the city of Greensboro, and this is during redlining between the 20s and the 50s, had operated an incinerator and landfill in the area of Bingham Park. Um, and they had found that Bingham Park had unsafe levels of contamination from that site many years ago. And the citizens of that neighborhood started raising the voice about it. And then the city brought forth an option to kind of cap and cover the park, where they would bury a lot of the waste beneath like this plastic covering, and then put like a foot layer of dirt, right, to try to cover that, which didn't go over well with the community, because they were like, the trees would be destroyed. They wouldn't be able to put new structures back in the park, not even a basketball court, right? And it would just end up becoming a empty expanse of just land. And there's still the risk of some leakage or some puncturing that could cause these chemicals still to leak and poison the soil and maybe other things in the neighborhood. So they actually met with City of Greensboro DEQ to try to work out some solutions, and they actually are still in the process. But they said the meetings went well. But it's one of those struggles once again, where the city needs to recognize the damage that was done, and try to make a tone for it. But we celebrate this community coming together to raise this voice for citizens, because once again, oftentimes we see our communities of colors, or poor or lower socioeconomic communities, being the site for many of these injustices. So we give a shout out. I don't want to go too deep, because we got a couple more things, but shout out to them for standing up and organizing enough to start working on plans and solutions. I know they're throwing up solution maybe to build another park kind of adjacent. It may not be as big as the original, but I know that's up for discussion. But we'll try to stay noted on how that goes. But shout out to the Bingham Park Environmental Justice Project in Greensboro, North Carolina. Shout out. Want to touch on another thing, because those of us who live in Greensboro kind of keeping up. I live more on the northeast side of town, District 2, holla holla. But we know in southeast Greensboro there's been um, some concerns over the water quality and discoloration and stuff going on with the water. I know at the beginning of the year, there were several meetings with the Southeast Greensboro Coalition to address this, and now the city is actually planning or said they're going to plan to put $75 million to cleaning it up. And what the problem is these PFAS chemicals. Don't get me trying to say all these names, but polyfluoroalkyl substances, right? Which are substances that are uh, linked to carbons and fluoride to help sustain the water. But they can only be at a certain level. And the thing about them is that these PFAS substances, and Greensboro uses what they call PFOA. Um, I'm not going to try to say it, and PFOS of these PFAS chemicals right here. But the problem is a lot of those particles are slow to, I guess, dissolve or waste, and they can stay in the body and stuff. So if levels are way above that, these things are staying in our bodies and soil, boom, boom. And a lot of these things are used for like plastic ware, food coverings, non-stick uh, kitchenware. So we understand the problem with this. So they're trying to work out getting these levels stable, which they were at 35.6, what they say parts per trillion. That's a water measurement. I'm not in that. I'm not a chemist or whatever, so don't ask me. But they are trying to address it because it also was reported that the water was like yellowish, rusty, and brownish. So, and the city did admit it was probably like iron and manganese that was accumulating in the pipes. So, the city is currently flushing the lines. I don't know if you've been around the city and seen them draining the fire hydrants and stuff. So they are trying to address it, but once again, the city said they're going to try to put 75 million to fix up the I forgot the name of the water plant, um, uh, or the treatment center. Uh, but but I'll get that. But anyway, but once again, we see um, which areas of our community is usually impacted. In Southeast Greensboro, it's heavy concentration of minority homeowners and renters. So, um, not to say it was anything deliberate. I don't want to get into that, but um, it's just interesting, right? How these things continue to impact our communities um, more so than others. So, lastly, on this, I know, I'm putting on my environmentalist hat. I'm no expert, but just as far as statewide news and those who may be into this, I hope you can share with me more information and help edify me on stuff I may be missing. Um, but I saw an article, and this is from the Robesonian, I believe in Robeson County, uh, a writing where it was talking about now the General Assembly and some lawmakers in the General Assembly of North Carolina are kind of walking back legislature um, that was committed to new clean energy standards and continuing to improve clean energy in North Carolina. One that was pushed by uh, Governor Roy Cooper, former Governor Roy Cooper, but now they're kind of walking it back, and we know the concerns with or the battle with energy and emissions, and clean energy is not totally like renewable resources. It can be some non-renewable resources that have low emissions, right? So it's a difference between green and clean. That little nuance, but it is striving to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and finding renewable resources for sustainability, right? Um, we know there's a battle with that, right? But Greensboro was becoming one of the leaders, and they had um, public uh, utilities here that were making commitments to reach what we call carbon neutrality, right? By 2050, goal by 2030 to reach about 70% or reducing emissions by 70%, which is very vital, right? Keeping the air safe and clean, protecting citizens. But this is kind of rolled back um, for whatever reason, right? They're fighting this, and it kind of stems from the Inflation Reduction Act, where there was uh, some legislature in there addressing this issue, but it still remains a fight, and this is a big fight, um, because North Carolina once again is kind of a national leader, right, in spearheading the clean energy industry, specifically as the article stated, in solar energy and electric vehicle technology. Uh, Early 2007, it said. So, North Carolina being one of those leaders, this has become a big issue. Um, so, uh, and I know the article states, negotiating after 2050 carbon neutrality commitment for electric public utilities. And, there's a fight, right, with these power stations and Duke Power, and that might drive up our bills. I'm not going to get into that. But we have seen a boost, right, with jobs. They said because um, I guess North Carolina had put about 21 billion into private sector clean energy investment, which they said brought about 17,000 jobs. So once again, North Carolina has invested a good portion to develop more clean energy, or more clean energy products. So just want to make you aware of that. And I'll put the link for this article also in the chat. But it's one of those things that we have to pay attention to, because it impacts all of us, right? And we need to be aware because we never know what projects are coming, with the growth of the city. I know my area has grown significantly with Beltline, and we got a new public distribution center in our area, and it's continuing to grow. But you have to be aware of the possible environmental impacts, especially if you got family out here. You want them to be safe. You want to have quality air, quality water, just a healthy way of life, a safe way of life. But I'm done harping on that. But please check it out and just be aware. Stay in tune. All right. So let me lift up something before we get out here. Before I get to our just our book. I often try to share something. I'm gonna put the pastoral hat. The more I like to say a spiritual. I ain't gonna say influencer. I don't know how many followers I got, but spiritual, motivator, right? I don't know. Okay, I'm sorry. I get whacked sometimes, but just want to lift up some scriptures because once again, I kind of talked about this on Thursday night when I did the Wednesday Wisdom. You know, when we're in the midst of what all is going on in the world, um, in our nation, I know there's a lot of protests that are going on today and stuff. You know, we just sometimes need inspiration or something that just reaffirms that purpose we had. And I know on Thursday I went through a couple of the Beatitudes from Matthew 5 just to remind us, our heart being set for God. We need to thirst and hunger for righteousness, right? We need to be merciful, right? This goes hand in hand with mercy, compassion, forgiveness. And blessed are the peacemakers, right? Because that has to be the ultimate goal. What are we doing for peace? But there are times we stand up for justice, right, and righteousness because we seek it. But one thing I like to lift up in times like this, right, is Micah 6:8, which says, He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? Let me take that back, because mortal means human being, right? He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. Good is the opposite of evil, right? It's not good and bad, it's good and evil, right? He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, justice, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. If that doesn't sound like Christ, I don't know what does, right? But we see this command. What does the Lord require of you? To act justly. So it's about actions, right? We can speak it and talk it, but we have to act. So actions justly and love mercy, not just try to be it here and there or think about it from time to time. We have to love it, which is a divine characteristic, a divine attribute, love. You can't measure love. You can't see it or touch it. It is divine, right? But love mercy and walk humbly with your God. God does the exaltation. We don't do it to seek position, power, placement, or ego. God exalts. That's just the primary lesson from Christ. But let me keep going. Let me keep going. But I enjoy that, and I want to share one more because this is something that is often forgotten about in those teachings of Christ, where Christ pulls from Old Testament prophets and scriptures, right, and the Psalms, right. There's always that call to the most vulnerable people. And I know you may have heard it somewhere else, but this thing is real. And we find it all through the Old Testament. We find it in Christ, in throughout the Gospels, and in the New Testament, the call to the most vulnerable. So I want to share two things, and I'm gonna share from the wisdom literature because I do love this psalm. But Psalm 82. I ain't gonna get into 6 today, but 82 and 6. But Psalm 82, 3 and 4. Psalm 82, 3 and 4 says, defend the weak and the fatherless. Uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed. Let me go back to that. Let's hear that again. Psalm 82, verse 3 says, defend the weak and the fatherless. Uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed. Verse 4 says, rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. I'm going to let that one settle. Right? But furthermore, if we go to Proverbs, also wisdom literature, let's go to Proverbs 31, verses 8 and 9, which says, speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Let me go back. Make sure you heard me. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and needy. Right? So when we think in terms of seeking justice, right, we have to remember the purpose, right? Those who may not have a voice, or those who have had their voices suppressed, or those who have been exploited or taken advantage of. And I'm not throwing darts, but I'm just connecting it. Even when we look at our examples of the environmental justice and who's impacted, right? Shout out and kudos to those groups that step up and raise that voice. I'm going to a couple of this meetings this week. With some groups to just organize around some stuff, because you know we have to we have to be prepared to help those who are most vulnerable. We know often it's especially in the New Testament, we see it in the naming of widows and children, right? But once again, here we see it specifically, right? In a lot of wisdom literature and Old Testament scripture, right? The naming of also the poor, the weak, right? To protect them from evil, which is the opposite of good. So let's just be mindful of that in our walk, in whatever we do. If you teach, coach, whatever, right? We are supposed to be bringing strength and protection to those who may be vulnerable, and guiding them in the way of righteousness and justice, right? Because we know in these roles and these many hats we wear, right, we impact people. So always remember that, and just remember, right? When you're moving in that spirit of love, right? Nothing can deter it, nothing can defeat it, nothing can destroy it, right? Because love overcomes all. So I'm gonna take that hat off, right? And now I'm gonna go back to bookstore guy. But before I do that, let me give y'all a reminder, because sometimes I believe y'all forget. Let me do this. Of water and the spirit, right? Malidoma Patrice Somé. So I kind of gave you like the introduction last Saturday, where Patrice talked about his being taken at a young age by these Jesuit priests and kind of raised up in the Catholic manner, or the Jesuit manner, and then coming back to his village and his clan, his tribe, at about age 20, and trying to become reacquainted with their culture, because he had been, for the most part of his life at this point, raised in the what he called the colonialist culture, right? Um, and the adjustment, he had to learn to walk in both of those worlds, because he went on uh, to master's degrees and a doctorate. Um, so he saw some, the value in those things, but he also wanted to make sure it didn't deflect or negate um, his walk in his indigenous culture of West Africa. He's from Burkina Faso. Shout out to Burkina Faso. Um, but I just want to open up something that was interesting, that he pointed out. And in the opening chapter, uh, he speaks strongly of his relationship with his grandfather and the grandfather's role within his compound, his clan, right? And he speaks about just the relationship of the grandfather and the child, right? He kind of speaks of it in this ancestral and spiritual understanding, right? The young had just come to the world to bring, the message of the ancestors, and we know the grandfather or grandparents that are up in age are closer to returning, right? So they say this is why there's a bond, a special bond between grandparent and child. because both are so close. One like ascending to, one descending from, right? The ancestral realm, right? And many times, they have rituals like before birth to kind of that he said is lifted up to kind of identify the ancestor who the child is, I guess you want to say, lack of better terms, reincarnating, right? Uh, and that's how they named the child. And he said, even in conversation, and he's a young guy at this time. He asked his grandfather. His grandfather always called him uh, brother Malidoma. Malidoma was the name given, by his clan, but Patrice was the name given by the Jesuits, right? But his father called him brother because he felt he was the and I'm taking liberties with this language, but the reincarnation of his brother, who he lost. Um, so he often called him brother, and he talked about how grandfather spoke like as equals. It wasn't a paternal type of engagement, but the kids kind of were raised by the community, but the grandfathers were the ones who shared the stories and the histories and taught the lessons because of that bond. And that was real interesting to me because we understand the bond between children and grandparents, right? Mom, dad, get out the way. Let me have time with my grandbaby, right? And we understand that, but it's interesting when you look at that concept, right? That Malidoma lifts up. And just I don't want to ruin the book in case you want to read it, but it was just beautiful to see that relationship and what he gained from his grandfather. He and one last thing I'll bring up though, he also pointed out in that opening chapter a situation involving his father. Um, and I'll just put it like this, not to spoil, but his father had converted to Catholicism, and there was some internal conflict, not just with him, but with some of his family members, because in his conversion, he really dismissed a lot of the cultural and indigenous practices of his people, the Dagara, and he kind of ignored some of those practices, rituals, what have you, which caused a lot of internal turmoil with him, um, as well as some disconnect with the family. But at one point, after several things had taken place, um, he reconnected, I'll say, with some of the Dagara spiritual practice, and things begin to change, but he still preserved his Catholicism. So it was interesting, and it kind of speaks to that juxtaposition of the Jesuit missionaries and the cultural or indigenous practices of the Dagara. So you kind of see that early, but I ain't gonna get more into it. But very interesting, and we just at the beginning stages. But I'm gonna put it up again of water and the spirit, ritual, magic, and initiation in the life of an African shaman, the late Malidoma Patrice Some. So check it out, get it if you can. So far, I am loving it. So on that note, just remember, stay safe, be good. If you can't be good at it. No, I didn't say that. But I pray you have a blessed remainder to your weekend. Hope to maybe see you at some events today, tomorrow, maybe throughout the week, the ones I'll be able to be here for. But if not, be blessed, enjoy, and I will see y'all on Wednesday. Peace.